Let's start with the Gemara in Beitza. Meitive. אחד ביצה שנולדה בשבת, ואחד ביצה שנולדה ביום טוב. אין מטלטן אותה, לא לכסות בה את הכלי ולא לסמוך בה כתר המיטה, right? So it's מוקצה. Okay? אבל כופה עליו את הכלי בשביל שלא תישבר. Okay? וספיקה אסורה. Whereas if you have a suffix whether it's muktzah or not, whether it's nolda b'yom tov or b'shabbat, so it's aser. V'im nit'arev be'elef, and this is the machlokes rishonim. Im nit'arev be'elef, if the suffix was nit'arev be'elef, or now we're not talking about the suffix anymore, we're talking about the beitza itself, nit'arev be'elef, that's machlokes in Rabbeinu Tam. Okay? V'im nit'arev be'elef, kulan asurot. It's not butter. Okay. Bishlam al Rabba damim mishum hachana. So Rabba holds an issa doraisa. Havi sveka doraisa. That's why sveka asura. Okay. V'chol sveka doraita l'chumra. Okay. El Rav Yosef Rabbi Yitzchak da'amar mishum gzeira. It's only asim midrabanan.
Sorry, I didn't understand. The Ri and Rabbeinu Tam have a machloket
about what fell into the tarovet. It says v'im nitarva be'elef. Because it says the beitza is aser, and then the suffix is aser. And if it fell into elef, it's aser. What fell into elef?
But then will it be, how will it be sveka if it's not, I don't know.
If it's the suffix which fell into the elef,
then it's sveka.
Then it's sveka.
But if it's the vada that fell into the elef,
then it's not sveka. It's just telling you that it's not bata.
You just don't understand how that Rishon reads the Gemara.
What's your problem?
Yeah.
What?
How would the Rishon read the rest of the Gemara?
What?
Whichever side holds that the beitza.
And then he will go into all the Gemaras that say this is sveka.
No, so if it's a sveka, or
it won't be a sveka.
If it's not a sveka, then because sveka would be mutar, right? If you hold sveka is usher, then you say hold sveka is usher even because it's davar sheyesh l'matirin, and that gets into that whole thing. Okay. Right. In the el kulano surot. Bishlam el Rabba da mishum hachana v'sveka d'oraita v'chosek d'oraita l'chumra. El Rav Yosef Rabbi Yitzchak da amar mishum gzeira sveka d'rabanan hi v'chos sveka d'rabanan l'kula. So just learned it's not kol sveka d'rabanan l'kula. Okay, but all right, whatever.
All right.
All right. V'chos sveka d'rabanan l'kula. Any sveka d'rabanan like this is l'kula. Okay. So what do we say? Seifa atan l'safek treifa. No, so we tell you when we say sfeika asura, we're not talking about the suffix, according to Rav Yosef, we're not talking about the suffix beit shinol b'yom tov. We're talking about a different case, we're talking about the suffix treifa. Okay, the Amoraim do that. Ihachi, so therefore we're saying sfeika doraisa is l'chumra, sfeika d'rabanan, if it's suffix muktzah is l'kula. Ema seifa nitarva be'elef kulan asurot. So why, if it's nitarev be'elef, is it aser? Iyamrit bishlam a suffix yom tov suffix chol havi davar sheish lo matirin. Okay, v'chol davar sheish lo matirin afil be'elef lo batil. Now, if we're talking about not suffix treifa, we're talking about beitza shenol b'yom tov. So then I understand why it's afil be'elef lo batil. Because it's davar sheish lo matirin. Ela iyamrit suffix treifa, davar she'ein lo matirin hi v'tibatel beruba. So there's no reason it shouldn't be batel berov. Okay? So what interests us is the Gemara says that davar sheish lo matirin is not batel berov. Okay? Why should davar sheish lo matirin not be batel berov? We've talked about other things which are not batel berov. We talked about rimone badan. We talked about bria. Right? Certain things which have inherent chashivut. Because bittul berov is loss of identity in the rov. But certain things, if they have some sort of physical qualities which grant them chashivut, so then they don't lose their identity in the rov. So that's why they're not batel. That's just a simple explanation. But davar sheish lo matirin, there's nothing physical about a davar sheish lo matirin that makes it different than anything else. If anything, somehow it's more analogous to avodah zarah. Right? Avodah Zarah, Isur Avodah Zarah also not batel barov. That's because of the chumrah of the Isser, not because of the chashibut of the chayfetz, but because of the chumrah of the Isser. And we actually saw a difference in the, remember there was a steer in the Rambam between whether you need 2 tarovot or 3 tarovot. So when it's because of the chashibut of the chefza, you need 3 tarovot. When it's just because of the chumrah of the Isser, 2 tarovot is sufficient. You remember this? Okay? Good. I need that. Positive feedback. Okay? All right. So, what's the reason that double sheish l'matirin shouldn't be batel barov? So obviously it's somehow closer to the idea of avodah zarah not being batel barov, something about the isser, right? Rather than the chashivut of the chayfetz. Inside the chashivut of the chayfetz there's no difference at all. Okay? All right, so let's see Rashi. Rashi says, sheyesh lo matirin, okay, sheyachol la'ochlo achar yom tov, beheter gomur. Very important. What does it tell you? First of all, okay, sheyachol la'ochlo achar yom tov, that after yom tov it will be mutter. So it's asur now, it will be mutter later. Okay, that's a davar sheyesh lo matirin. Okay. What else can you say? It becomes mutter all by itself. You don't have to do anything to make it mutter. It's asur on Shabbos and Yontif. God makes the sun set, and it becomes chol, and at the same time that the sun sets and it becomes a new day, the beitza becomes muteret. Okay, so that happens all by itself. So that's a davar sheyesh lo matirin. But he gives a rationale. Sheyachol la'ochlo achar yom tov beheter gomur. We talked about this already also, somewhat, right? Beheter gomur. That means, what's the alternative? If you say something's beheter gomur, what does that mean? What? There's such a thing as heter she'eno gomur. What's the case of heter she'eno gomur? When you eat it al yidei bittul. Normally, if you don't have something sheyesh lo matirin, you have a piece of nevela, falls into your cholent, and if you have rov and shishim, etc., so it's butter, so you're allowed to eat it. It's not heter gomur. Right? I'm just going with what Rashi says. Okay. After Yom Tov, this beitza will be heter gomur. It's only asur on Shabbos. It's only asur on Shabbos and Yom Tov. It's not asur afterwards. Okay. So that has to do. This alludes to what we think of bittul. You can ask a very simple question. Is there room to be machmir? Suppose this isser falls into the thing and you say it's batel, but you don't want to eat it. Right? So is there room to be machmir? I don't want to be somech on bittul. Is that a lifnim mishurat hadin? Right, that's I think one of the Chassidish rabbis who wrote the Bnei Yisachar. Okay? Normally I don't quote Hungarian Chassidish rabbis, but in any case, the Bnei tells Iran with Bichlal breaking down all barriers. So whatever barriers remain. The Bnei Yisachar says that it's a mitzvah to eat something al yidei bittul, because the fact that it was mitbatel means that means that the nitzotzot you have to be ma'aleh the nitzotzot of this thing, right? Right. That has to do. It really does go back to how you view eating, and we talked about that in the very beginning of the year. When I first saw that, I thought it was like really ridiculous because I was in Litvish Klippus in those days. But now, actually, something like that makes sense. That
Yosef Engel says
what?
Yosef Engel says the same thing.
Yosef Engel says the same thing. Oh,
yeah.
That's what you said. This thing you said.
Yeah.
Me? And Yosef Engel was a Galicianer.
Yeah.
So okay. I'm not sure if it was Hasidish though.
He had some pistachios with the oil.
Oh yeah. Okay. In any case, but what you see from here is that eating al yidei bittul is not heter gomor. Okay, that's very important, and that ties in with what we're going to talk about next week. In mevatlan isur l'chatchila. But let's just stick to here. So Rashi says, "So yachol ochlo achar yom tov beheter gomor, afilu be'elef lo batil, va'afal gav de midoraita chad betrei batil midoraita." We said. Everything is batel, right? Tichtiv acharei rabim lahatot, ach murabanan, ho'il v'yesh lo matirin la'achar zman, lo yochlenu, he says more explicitly, lo yochlenu be'isser. When you eat something al yidei bittul, you're eating it be'isser, al yidei bittul. Okay? So hovi yesh lo matirin al chazman lo yichlenu be'isser al yidei bittul. So that's one take. Why is davar sheyesh lo matirin not batel? Basically, achu techlenu be'isser, techlenu be'heter. All you have to do is wait. What's your rush? Right? If it's ein lo matirin, so the Torah gives you a way to eat it, but it's b'di'evet. Okay, that's all right. So that's Rashi. Okay, the Ran is very different. The Ran.
Is there any reason to think that this particular year is not lach b'lach?
It doesn't matter. In other words, we're talking here, the reason we're dealing with Davar Sheyesh Matirin at the end of the year, as opposed to the beginning of the year, is because the issue is not an issue of tam, it's an issue of identity. It belongs in the sugya of Yavesh. Because there is no, whether there's a tina tam or not, we'll have to talk about whether you say this in min b'she'eino mino as well. Okay? That's what I'm about to touch upon. Okay? But it doesn't have to do...
Yeah. To bring it back to when we started the Rush and the Rashba about eating all the pieces one after the other.
Right, okay.
The point of fact is that we didn't line up Rashi and say that he disagrees with the Rush, because the Rush clearly felt that it changed.
If you can eat all three at the same time, Seheter Gomer Mashvinan Lei. That's a good point. Right, you can tie it back in. In other words, you ever get what Aaron is saying? Okay, well, I'll be mafarish you. Okay, you tell me. Okay. So what Aaron is saying is as follows: we had a machloket between the Rush and the Rashba, and the Tosot Rid. The Rashba might only be a Chumrah D'Rabbanan, but let's talk about the Rush and the Tosot Rid. In Bittul Barov of Yavesh, you have 3 pieces of meat. 2 are kasher and 1 is nevela. Okay. So according to the Rush, you can eat all 3 at the same time. That because it's Bittul Barov. It's the language of nepach iser liot heter. Okay, you can eat all 3 at the same time. Whereas the Tosot Rid says that if you eat all 3 at the same time, if you're talking about a chiv kares, suppose you're talking about chela, for example, or chametz b'Pesach, if you eat all 3 at the same time, so then you're chayav achatas. Right? That's what the Tosot Rid says. So embedded in that is what we think of bittul, right? So if you say bittul is heter gamur, so you're going against Rashi. In other words, Aaron's saying that this Rashi is against the Rush. Right? When the Rush says heter gamur, Rashi would not agree that it's heter gamur. He would be more in the camp of the Tosot Rid. Yeah, al panav, that makes sense. I mean, I assume you could wiggle out of it, but al panav, yeah. Okay. Okay. The Ran has a different understanding of Davar Sheyesh Lo Matirin, and it's based on the fact that the Yerushalmi says explicitly that there's a chiluk between min b'mino and min b'she'eino mino. Okay? That in Davar Sheyesh Lo Matirin, eino batel, only in min b'mino. In min b'she'eino mino, Davar Sheyesh Lo Matirin is batel like everything else. Okay? That's the Yerushalmi. The Rambam quotes it, but he's not sure about it. If you take a look at the Rambam that I have here from Perek Tetvav in Machot Asurot, Perek Tetvav, Halach Yud Aleph and Yud Bet. Okay? So the Rambam says as follows: Aval orla v'kili akerem v'chele v'dam keyotzei behen v'chein trumot natnu chachamim behem shiur she'ein behem derech heter l'chol adam. Okay, so these things there are different shiurim. Yira'el li in Halacha Yud Bet, the Rambam says Yira'el li. Whenever the Rambam says Yira'el li, it means he did not see an explicit source. But he reached this conclusion through his own reasoning. How do I know that that's what the Rambam says? That's what the Rambam means when he says Yira'el li. Because in his Hakdama to Sefer HaMitzvos, when he outlines that he's going to write this book called Mishnah Torah, he says, I have a source for everything, but if I don't have a source, I'm going to say Yira'el li. Right? So that's how he does it. He says here, Yira'el li, she'afilu davar sheyesh lo matirin, im nit'arev b'she'eino mino, V'lo natan tam, mutar. Okay? So the Rambam says, Yera Eli, that there's a chiluk between in Davar Shesh L'Matirin, between min b'mino and min b'she'eno mino. Okay?
We understand this to mean that he didn't see the Yerushalmi.
He didn't. Maybe he had. There's the Yerushalmi problem Girsa'ot. He may have had a different Girsa'ot to the Yerushalmi. But in any case, the Rambam says of the Yer Ali, the Ravid goes out of his way to say Mishnah Shleimahi. It's beferish, right? He agrees with the Rambam more than the Rambam. It's not Yer Ali. We're saying Yer Ali like you made it up, right? It's true. It's Mishnah Shleim. Okay. So in any case, if you say Ach Tuchlenu be'Isur Tuchlenu be'Heter, the explanation of Rashi, you don't really understand why there should be a chiluk there between min b'mino and min b'she'eno mino. Al panav, you don't really understand, right? So this is what bothers the Ran, and the Ran has a totally different explanation for why davar she'esh lo matirin is not batel. Okay, so let's take a look here. This is, I think, this is probably the most famous Ran in Shas. Okay, maybe there's another one. You know what the other? Who knows what the other famous? You have to promise ice creams to people. What's the other famous Ran? What? Yeah. Okay, I eat an ice cream. The other famous Ran is Kinyan by Kiddushin. He says the man is not kona the woman. He says the woman is mafkira et atzma. She makes herself hefker, and the man is in zoche. But he's not kona her directly. He says that's how the legal mechanism works. Right? And that's the other famous one. Okay? But I think this one's more famous. So he said, so he says as follows. Let me get on the second page. Okay? Do we have the same formatting? I sent it to you like after I formatted it. I sent it again, so we should all be able to. What? But I made it bold though. I did embolden. It says v'kach nira li. See that? It's on the second page of the Ran. 6 lines from the top. V'kach nira li in bold. Okay? V'kach nira li b'tamo shel davar. Yeah? Why, in general, why davar she'esh lo matirin is not batel, and he's coming to explain why there should be a chiluk between min b'mino and min b'she'eno mino. Okay? Okay. V'kach nira li b'tamo shel davar. The chazina l'Rabbanan u'Rabbi Yehuda the ifligu b'min b'mino I batil olo. This is general machloket. Forget about davar she'esh lo matirin. There's a general machloket tanaim between Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim whether min b'mino is batil or not. Okay? We paskin min b'mino is batil b'rov. Okay? Rabbi Yehuda said min b'mino is not batil. Okay? Rashi is the only Rishon who passes like Rabbi Yehuda. Min b'mino is not batil. Okay? But we don't pass him that way. Okay? But he's saying even though we don't pass him that min b'mino is not batil, we don't pass like Rabbi Yehuda, but there's something very important to learn about bittul from his shita. Okay? You okay, Mish? Okay. All right. You just look pained by this run, okay? There's a lot of fun this run, okay? V'amrinu perek kometz rabba, the shnei mikra echad darshu, d'chtiv v'lakach midama par midama seir, on avodat yom kippurim, v'af api shedamo shel par merubeh, everyone knows that damo shel par is merubeh midam shel seir, right? V'kari le dam seir, but it's still called dam seir. It means even though you have a ta'arovet of dam para and dam seir, okay, it's still called dam seir. The Torah still calls it dam seir. Okay? Al malo batil. So you see the dam seir is not batil on the dam shapar. Okay? So Rabbi Yehuda's explanation of that, because Rabbi Yehuda, the hainu tamim mishum damin b'mino lo batil. Lefi shekol davar. Okay. This is the beginning explanation.
What you just said about Rashi?
What
When we read the Rashi here, you said he doesn't make a distinction, but it means that Rashi has to think it's min she'eno mino.
What?
Because you just said that he holds like Rabbi Yehuda min she'eno. When we read the Rashi here, in this case.
I see what you're saying. Okay, but I don't know if he have any fires the sugya. Okay, I'm not sure what he would do with that. Okay, but so maybe he has to hold it even in min b'she'eno mino. Okay, could be. In any case, he's about to give the explanation. Okay, He says, "Lefi shekol davar shehu domeh lechavero eino machlisho umevatlo ela ma'amido umechazko umishum hachi svir le Rabbi Yehuda bekulu isurei demin b'mino lo batil." Okay, Rabbi Yehuda's statement of min b'mino lo batil is predicated on a certain understanding of bittul. Bittul is when you have a conflict, almost a violent, it's a little violent, that bittul is when you have a conflict between two essences. And when you have a conflict, so the whatever it is, the rove or the whatever the shear that you require, when you have that shear, so the one side is mitgaber on the other side. Okay? But in order to have bittul, you need a conflict. But if you have two things which are similar, in other words, if it's min b'mino, so then there is no bittul. One is it's still there because there's no conflict. Bittul is predicated upon conflict. Okay, where one side is mitgaber on the other side. Okay? And that's the reason why Rabbi Yehuda holds min b'mino lo batil. In other words, you can't say, since it's dam, the dam par, and the dam seir, so you can't say there's no dam seir here because it got mixed up with dam par. So what? So it's dam par and dam seir. There's still dam seir here. There's nothing in the dam par that makes the dam seir disappear. Right? It's not like the dam got mixed up with chelev. Okay? And there's so much chelev you don't see the dam. Okay, so you say, now I look at this tarovet, and I say it's chelev and the dam is gone. Halachically. I mean, I'm sure if I did a chemical analysis, I would find it. Right? But it doesn't matter. But that since I have the necessary rove, if it's chelev and dam, or shuman and dam, so then I say the dam isn't there anymore. Okay? I look at the tarovet and I say this is a tarovet which now is shuman and not dam. But here, beforehand, it's dam and after it's dam. So you have this type of dam, that type of dam, but there's no bittul. Okay? So he says, Rabbanan who disagree with Rabbi Yehuda do not disagree in principle. They also agree that you need a conflict in order to have bittul. That is a given. Everybody agrees to that. The question is, how do you define a conflict? What parameters do you use to determine whether the two elements here are in conflict or not? Okay? It says, Rabbanan lo mashma lahu hachi demikol makom min b'mino de iser v'heter ein domin zelazeh. He's saying, even though it's min b'mino, what is min b'mino? Means it's the same substance physically. Okay? But one is aser and one is mutter. So halachically, they have different identities. Okay? Ein domin zelazeh, keim dechad aser, dechad shari. She'ein ra'ui lalechet achar dimyonam be'etzem. Don't use the physical criteria. Ela achar chilukan be'isr ve'heter. Use the halachic criteria. So min b'mino lo batel. Rabbanan agree that min b'mino lo batel, but they say that isser and heter is min b'she'eino mino. One is asr, one is mutter. So if you have a tarovet of isser ve'heter, right? If you have more heter, so the heter is mitgaber on the isser. Okay, it just has to do with how you determine what your min and eino mino are, right?
Even though they call it min b'mino.
Right. But don't get confused by the terminology of min b'mino is the physical attributes, right? And even in that, we saw the machlok Abai and Rava, whether it's bata shma or bata tama, right? But that's parenthetical because they both have to do with the physical object, right? Then that's a question of which characteristics of the physical object are you looking at. But clearly, the terminology of min b'mino is the physical object, okay? But conceptually, what the Ran is saying is that even if it's min b'mino physically, right? Let's agree on the terminology. Even though it's min b'mino, and that means min b'mino physically, Rabbanan still say this bittul because it's min b'she'eino mino halachically. Because you have a mixture of isser v'heter, that's also min b'she'eino mino.
The halachic status.
Right, the halachic status determines. This is very important because according to the Ran, you don't have bittul of heter v'heter. If you have some milk that falls into water, right? The case that Rabbi Sperber quoted, right? where there was milk that fell into the meat, the Erev Shabbos, and the Reb Chaim called the Chalvan over and said, just tell me how much water do you put in your milk, right? And if the milk was watered down enough, then he figured out that that there was shishim keneged the milk, right? But the milk is not batel, right? Milk cannot be batel in water because it's heter beheter. There's no conflict at all, right? Unless it's min b'she'eno mino b'mitziut, right? But if you say heter beheter is not batel at all, right? So it's a problem with this bittul in such a case, okay? But let's get back to here. So
It's only work, if you go back to the question that you left open, again, when we started, about the marker for the halacha d'achayot lahata. The Gemara in Kulin gave two examples. They gave Sanhedrin, and they gave Teisha Chanuya.
through B'deisa, come on, yeah?
And you asked the question that was left open, that, there's a difference between Sanhedrin and Teisha Chanuya. And the Pri Megadim actually asked the question, and it says, Iyun. So, if you're talking about Sanhedrin, you have your marker for conflict.
Right, different opinion,
Okay?
right? They're all people,
But if you take,
they're
but
different.
if you take, if the other case that takes the Chanuya, the piece of meat that we have, the shaila is cold, is it perished from the road. The identity of that piece of meat is not in conflict. There's no conflict about this piece of meat. It's just a question of whether it, where it
No,
came
but
from.
in terms of looking about where it came from, so did it come from the chanut, which is us, or from the chanut, which is mutter?
But there's no conflict between them. You only have one piece of meat. On Sanhedrin, you have those that voted for.
No, but you have a tarovet of chanut. The tarovet is chanuyot.
But there's no the piece of meat when you bought the piece of meat, it was in the store. You was kosher. You was kosher.
Yeah, but again, that's not a case. Oh, it really is. That's not a case of bittul. That's a case of azlina bataruba. We're talking about bittul barov. Are you talking about bittul? Right, when it's in a tarovet in front of you. We're talking about bittul. We're not talking about azlina bataruba that you have one piece of meat. The general problem, I don't get the general problem is how do you derive bichlal bittul barov macharei rabim lahatot, right? Sanhedrin Mela, maybe you can talk about it. But I don't want to go back to that issue. Well, let's continue in the Ran. So the Ran is saying that the foundation of Rabbi Yehuda, that min b'mino lo batel, which is that in order to have bittul, you need a conflict, that foundation is universally accepted. And the machloket between Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim is over what criteria do you use to determine whether something is min b'mino or min b'she'eno mino. Where Rabbi Yehuda says you look at the physical characteristics of the object, and Rabbanan say that you take into consideration the halachic status of the object. So if it's Isser and Heter, that also constitutes conflict in order to engender bittul. Got that? I don't know if I could say that again. Okay? All right. Let's continue. Until now, there's nothing tells us about this. Okay? But we'll see. He's about to travel from Spain to Lithuania. Okay? He says as follows. Right. He says, Dechi heichi de Rabbi Yehuda azil achar dimyon ha'etzem azu rabbanan achar dimyon ha'heter l'ficha kol shechalukim be'isr v'heter. If there's a distinction between one thing being mutter and one thing being aser, afilu min b'mino, even though it's the same min physically, batil dahavale kim min b'she'eno mino. Okay, is that clear? Good. Umishim hachi amrinan. All right, you ready? He's getting on the plane now. Okay. Umishim hachi amrinan de bedava sheyesh lo. Now he brings it to bedava sheyesh lo matirin. Amrinan de bedava sheyesh lo matirin. Not to Rabbanan mishum chumra l'Rabbi Yehuda. How so? They accepted Rabbi Yehuda in a case of davar she'esh lo matirin. Dekevan she'ein davar zeh. If it's a davar she'esh lo matirin, chaluk min haheter legamre be'isr v'heter. In the davar she'esh lo matirin, talk about chadash. Okay. So it's before Pesach and you have Tvuah Chadasha. Okay? It's going to be mutter after Pesach. Yeah? So that's less usher than nevela, which is going to be asa forever. Okay? So if you have a ta'arovet of tvua chadasha and tvua yishana, okay? So you don't have a conflict in min b'mino in the physical thing, because it's all tvua, right? And according to Rabbanan, the basis of the bittul in that case would be the halachic distinction between the isser and the heter. One is chadash and one is yashan. The yashan is mutter, the chadash is aser. So that would be the basis of the bittul. Correct? You with me? Mm-hmm. Okay. What? But, as they say in Aramaic, da'aka, right? The problem is that the isser isn't so aser. Right? The isser chadash, it's aser now, but it will be mutter on the 16th day of Nisan. Okay? So since it's not so aser, okay, the conflict necessary in order to have bittul between isser v'heter, because that's what we need in order to have bittul, even with Rabbanan, the conflict is insufficient. It's called, I think, in political science parlance, it's a low-intensity conflict. Right? It's what we have now with Palestinians. Right? It's a low-intensity conflict. Okay? Okay? What? Medium intensity? This is low intensity. Okay?
Considered min b'mino?
What? So it would be considered min b'mino. Okay, let's see. He takes us all the way. He runs around all the bases with this. Listen, okay? He says, Mishum ha'achi amrinan. I went back a little bit. De b'davar sheyesh lo matirin natu rabbanan mishum chumra l'Rabbi Yehuda. Their rabbanan accept Rabbi Yehuda. The kevan she'ein davar zeh chaluk min haheter legamrei. It's not completely different than the heter. Isser v'heter on the plane of isser v'heter in terms of halachic status. Sharei afu sofo liot nitar kamohu. Amrinan she'eno batel b'mino. De'ihachi havu damu tuva. Because then it's too similar. If it's min b'mino and it's davar she'esh lo matirin, it's too similar. Chada, how is it too similar? Chada, on one plane, shehem shavim b'min. Physically, it's the same min. It's min b'mino. V'od she'enam chalukim legamrei be'isr v'heter. And they're not enough different on the, halachically on the isr v'heter plane. So you don't have enough distinction between the two elements. Okay? Now is he coming to explain why is davar sheyesh lo matirin batel if it's min b'she'eino mino? Aval b'she'eino mino kedai she'oto chiluk sheyesh bein mino l'she'eino mino yashlim oto shivui shenitvasef kan mishum davar sheyesh lo matirin. You got that? What he's doing, he's adding different types of differences. Right? There's the halachic distinction, and there's the physical distinction. So let's start like this. Let's start with Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbana. Okay? According to Rabbi Yehuda, and where everybody agrees, okay, let's start before Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbana. Everybody agrees that in order to have bittul, you need X and non-X. Okay? You need two different things. Everybody agrees to that. Okay? What constitutes two different things? So according to Rabbi Yehuda, you look at the physical reality. And according to Chachamim, you look at the halachic reality. Okay? That's the second stage. Okay? Now, so this is what happens. Now, if you have a davar sheyesh lo matirin, what's the story midoraita? Davar sheyesh lo matirin midoraita is batel, like anything else. Why? Because it's aser. Now it's aser. Tomorrow it'll be mutter. But who cares about tomorrow? Now it's aser. You know the joke about the parrots, right? What's going to be? You know, the parrots can die, the dog can die. You know the joke? No. Forget it, doesn't matter. You don't know the joke. So what's going to be tomorrow, you don't know. Okay? right now it's Aser, that constitutes Issa Beheter. That's Min HaTorah. Right? So Davar She'esh Matira is nothing special Min HaTorah. Because Chachamim hold that even if it's Min B'mino, physically, if you have a conflict, halachically, that's sufficient to engender bittul. Okay? Then what happens midrabanan in Davar She'esh Matirin? In Davar She'esh Matirin, midrabanan, we say that since it's going to be mutter tomorrow, it's not so usher. You see where the fuzziness begins? It's not so usher. We generally say things like either mutter or usher, right? In brisk, certain things are mutter usher. There's no such thing as something which is like a little usher, right?
You could say aser b'torat vadai, or what?
No. That's b'torat something, but this is a little usher. It's not so usher, right? It's going to become it's in the nature of the isser itself. It's not a question of my knowledge. The thing is either mutter or usher, right? But here, I know exactly what this. I have this wheat, which is chadash, and I know that this is not as usher as something else. Okay, so he's saying since it's going to be mutter, its status falls from absolute isser. Okay, so that in conflict with heter is insufficient conflict. Because you have heter with something else which is a little usher. That's not enough. In order to have the necessary min b'she'eno mino, midrabanan. Okay? Midoraisa, it's enough. But midrabanan, they felt uncomfortable because it was like heter beheter. Okay? Now, that's one thing. So why should I be mechalek between min b'mino and min b'she'eno mino? So he says as follows. If it's min b'she'eno mino, right, if it's two different physical things, then the lack of conflict, what's lacking in the Isser, because it's a Davar She'esh Lo Matirin, and what's lacking in the Isser, not enough conflict, is made up in the physical.
Right, it's irrelevant.
Right? So you add up the little halachic difference with the physical difference, so together you have enough conflict to have bittul. But if it's min b'mino, so you don't have any physical conflict, and you don't have enough halachic conflict, right? So that's why min b'mino lo batel if it's davar she'esh matirin, but if it's min b'she'eno mino, so what you're lacking in the distinction between the isra v'heter, you make up in the distinction between the fact that it's min and eno mino in the physical difference. Okay? Okay, so why did the Rav say this is the Tel Zoran? He didn't explain why he said it was the Tel Zoran. He just said the Tel Zoran. But this is why he called it the Tel Zoran. Because you're adding apples and oranges. What is first, what does it mean to say something is more usser or less usser? Right? That's something that Brisk can't hear. Okay? And in addition to that, so now you're adding. So there's not enough conflict. Put it this way. Somebody wants to point this out. The moment you have to use your hands to explain the Svara, right? Like, what am I doing here? The moment that there's not, and I'm calling attention to this, the moment there's not enough conflict, right, that we're making up the lack of conflict between the Issa v'Heter by adding a different type of conflict. Okay? So I add, right, the little bit of conflict that there is between Davar She'esh Lo Matirin and the Heter, but that's not enough, and I add the fact that it's min b'she'eno mino. So together that's enough conflict. Right? So once you start going like this, it means it doesn't really make sense. Right? I have to visualize it.
If it was two mutter things were different means, we wouldn't call that conflict a conflict.
Correct. According to the Ran, that is how Rabbanan explained Dama Par v'Dama Seir. Right? Dama Par v'Dama Seir. So the Rabbi Yehuda says because it's min b'mino lo batel. And Rabbanan, what do Rabbanan do with that case? They say, Ein olim mevatlan zo ad zo. They're both ola on the mizbech. In other words, it's heter beheter. That's why it's not. That's how he understands it. Okay.
So that case.
So that everybody agrees. It says in the Torah, Dama Par and Dama Seir.
They are conceptualizing that the two means
because it's heter beheter.
Power to stay their own, though.
Right.
So it is a conflict. Okay, fine.
Okay. So that's the Ran. Okay, the most famous Ran in Shas, right? Namely, that the reason this is very important is that bittul is based upon conflict. Okay, that's the assumption, davar sheish lo matirin does not constitute sufficient conflict on the Durabanan level. Midoraisa, it's sufficient conflict. But Midurabanan, it is insufficient conflict, and therefore the valence of conflict has to be made up by min b'she'eino mino in order to have enough conflict to have bittul.
Do the briskers have a better explanation for the Yerushalmi?
What?
Do the briskers?
There is another explanation. I don't know if it's that we have to answer the Yerushalmi according to Rashi in any case. I'm going to deal with that. Okay, but first let's to see the Ran. Okay, so that's the Ran. Yeah.
I just want to raise the issue of dam when it's brought up. It seems like that falls into the category of lach and not tarovet b'yavish. Like, is there a difference qualitatively when you talk about tarovet?
Maybe. When the Rambam brings Bittul Barov, he brings it in two different cases. He brings a case of Chatichot, and he brings a case of Chelev and Shuman, right? But in the case, but there also, if you talk about Bittul Barov, where there's no din of Tam, because Chelev and Shuman is the same Tam, and the Damim, in the case of Zrika, I don't know if the Tam would be Kovea or the Mare would be Kovea, like in a mikveh Mare is Kovea, whichever. We're still talking about Bittul Barov as opposed to Bittul B'Shishim, so therefore you are talking about an identity issue still. Although the Rambam, when he talks about Chatichot, it could be that you need a simple rov, but when you talk about Chelev and Shuman, you might need 2 to 1. I talked about that, right? Remember? So you might need 2 to 1. So maybe there's a difference. The answer is maybe. Okay? But in any case, the Torah says that it's not batel at all, and it should at least be batel barov, right? Just if you hold bittul barov,
So the concept of bittul barov applies.
should apply there.
Should apply to both lach and yavish.
Yes, and it does, right? It does. Halacha l'maisa it does, right? If you have, if you're cooking kosher meat and treif meat falls into it and gets cooked together, right? If min b'mino. So midrabanan, you need shishim atu min b'she'eino mino, but midoraisa, rov is sufficient. That's bittul barov, because there's no tam, so you just have bittul barov. Okay. Okay, so that's the Ran. So we have 2 explanations. We're going to have to figure out how we explain the difference between min b'mino and min b'she'eino mino, but we have 2 explanations of why davar sheyesh lo matirin is not batel. One is much more straightforward. Rashi, Asher tuchlenu be'isser tuchlenu beheter. Why should you eat it when it's usser? Eat it beheter gamur. That assumes all sorts of things about how bittul works, that we don't like bittul, etc. Okay? Or what the Ran says is that you don't have the necessary conflict in davar sheish lo matirin in order to have bittul. Okay? Good? All right.
I need to ask such a basic question because you just said it so quickly and I got confused. In which case do we say which case did Durabanan we hold was shifting when it's normally rov?
What?
Which case did you say Durabanan?
Min b'mino. Min b'mino lach b'lach. You need shishim mid'Durabanan. Even if you need shishim mid'Oraisa, even if you need shishim mid'Oraisa for min b'she'eino mino,
If it's nishbach.
right? And the nafkamin is if you have a suffix, she'eino mino, you have to go suffix l'chumra. That was the mechaber. That's how we know that the mechaber holds tamkik as min Torah. Okay?
I just needed that with you.
Good. Okay. Fine. I did that because I realized you're going on. Okay? All right.
It's just hard to hold everything in one step.
I understand. Okay. So how do we understand Rashi if we want to accept the chiluk between min b'mino and min she'eino mino, which is difficult to reject because of the Yerushalmi? How do we understand that according to Rashi? So the key here is something that I found in the Torah Chatat, which is quoted in the Taz. It's Siman Kuf Aleph Sifkat and Yud Bet. Okay. Kuf Aleph Sifkat and Yud Bet. I think I gave it to you on the page, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just read it from here. Okay, let's see. The Ein Chiluk, let's see what this is going on. This is in Right, this is talking about Bria v'chatichu l'skaved, right? All right, so a Bria and a chatichu l'skaved are also not batel barov, yeah? And the Ramah says here in the din of chatichu l'skaved and Bria, v'ein chiluk bein nit'arvu b'minam o shelo b'minam. In this, there's no chiluk min b'mino m'she'eno mino. The chiluk is only in davar sheish lo matirin, but not in other things which are not batel. Okay? Okay. Now, v'ein chiluk bein nit'arvu b'minam. Perush, the le'inyan davar sheish lo matirin b'simin kuf bet, amrinan be'eno mino, afilu b'davar sheish lo matirin batil. Okay? So then, why is davar sheish lo matirin different than Bria and Chatiut L'Skave? So to the Ran, the difference is obvious, right? Okay. The Katav, now I'm just giving you the explanation here. The Katav b'Torat Chatat, Klal Mem. See that? Yeah? The Shani b'Davar She'esh Lo Matirin, She'ein HaChashivut Mitzad HaIsur Atzmo. Okay? It's not like Avodah Zarah. She'ein ha'chashivat mitzad ha'isur atzmo, ela me'achar sheyeh lo heter achar kach, lo ratzu chachamim sheyivatel. Okay, that's like Rashi. Yeah? Me'achar sheyeh heter achar kach, chachamim didn't want that there should be bittul. Yeah? V'chol, now here's the explanation. V'chol shnit arev Shelo b'mino, ein haheter nikra al davar ha'asur, ela al shem hadavar shnit arev bo. This is the key. V'hava k'mi she'ein lo matirin ad kan l'shono. Shall I read that again? Okay. He says, v'chol shnit arev Shelo b'mino, he's been mechalek here in how bittul works, whether it's bit in the case of min b'mino or case of min b'she'eno mino. Okay? D'chol shenit arev shelo b'mino, ein haheter nikra al davar ha'asur, ela al shem hadavar shenit arev bo. V'havi kemi she'ein lo matirin. One more time.
I got confused with the pronouns, actually.
One more time, okay? She'ein v'chos she'ter shelo b'mino. Ein, this is the key. Ein ha'heter, shem heter, right? The status of heter. Nikra al davar ha'asur. The davar ha'asur does not become mutar. I'm just translating it now. Okay? Ein ha'heter nikra al davar ha'asur, ela al shem ha'davar shenit arev bo. You have apples and oranges, okay? Min b'she'eno mino, and you have a row of apples. It's a tarov. It's apples now. Okay? You look at, there's one ta'arovet, and the ta'arovet has a new identity. Okay? El Hashem hadavar shenit arev bo. V'hava kemi she'ein lo matirin. What does that mean? Why don't you say everything has matirin? You can just nuke it, right? Subatomic particles of nevela are mutter, right? So everything you can be matir. So why don't you say everything is you can be matir? Because you weren't matir the issue, you destroyed it. Okay? If you can be matir the isser, that's a davar sheyesh lo matirin. Destroying the isser doesn't mean anything. He's basically saying that bittul of min b'she'eno mino works differently than bittul of min b'mino. Does this remind you of anything? We saw this. We saw it in Tzadi Chet, in the Pri Chadash. Remember? I'll read to you. The Pri Chadash says.
Where?
Okay, it's in the Pri Chadash in Tzadi Chet. I'm not going to get it. It had to do with the din of the Rashba. Okay? He says, one second. Hainu Tama. He's talking about just bittul min b'mino as opposed to bittul min b'she'eno mino. Hainu Tama. The kevan sheyesh shishim b'she'eno mino deheter neged ha'isser. Since there's 60 times heter against the isser. Har'el ein kan isser klal. V'nepach kol ha'ta'arovet leheter. V'ein kan me'isser afilu mashehu le'esor et mino. Deheter. Mashe'ein kain hacha, if it's min b'mino, d'lo shayach le'meimar salek et she'eno mino, b'nei she'bitul min b'mino b'rov, shebitul min b'mino b'rov min ha-Torah, haynu lefi she'eno nirgash tama isser beheter, sherei hakol min echad, ulefichach hekele b'Torah litbatel b'rov. Aval lo lomar sha'isser nepach leheter v'nitbatel legamrei dumya b'min she'eno mino. He said that in min b'she'eno mino, the isser is wiped out. In min b'mino, the isser is still there, but it's mutter to eat. Because in min b'she'eno mino, you have to define your ta'arovet. Right? So when you have the necessary, it's a formalistic definition because things don't really disappear. But halachically, when you have a mixture of min b'she'eno mino and you have rov heter, so we say the miut of eino mino is not there anymore. But in min b'mino, in the bittul b'rov, it's not that the isser isn't there. The isser is there. You just can't taste it. You just don't recognize it. So therefore, the Torah said you can eat it, but it doesn't mean that it's not there. Okay? So there are two different types of bittul. One is, right, if you talk about it in terms of warfare, right? One is unconventional warfare. You basically obliterate the isser. And the other is that the isser is still there, just mutter to eat under these circumstances. Okay? So how does this play itself out? It says as follows: Davish yesh lo matirin, right? Is you say this it's asur now, it's be mutter later. But in this tarovet, it doesn't exist anymore. There's nothing that's going to be mutter later. You destroyed it now. So if it's min b'she'eno mino, it's batel because it doesn't exist anymore. It's not a davar sheyesh lo matirin anymore. It's only davar sheyesh lo matirin if it's still there, and otherwise it would be mutter to eat. So in min b'mino, the way the bittul works is that it's still there, but it will be mutter to eat tomorrow, legamre. So why should I eat it now when it's not mutter legamre? Wait till tomorrow and it'll be mutter legamre. Okay? That rationale only applies if I don't like the bittul. Right? If I say the bittul is only matir b'di'eved because the isser is still there. Okay? So now the isser is still here. Under normal circumstances, I don't have a choice. The Torah chasam mamonam shel Yisrael, whatever reason that tells us, right? To give a reason, right? For whatever reason, right? That's brisk. Once I say Torah chasam mamonam shel Yisrael, that tells us a little bit, right? For whatever reason, Torah chasam mamonam shel Yisrael, that it's mutter to eat, even though the isser is still there. That I'll only allow if there's no alternative. But if you have an alternative, namely, wait till tomorrow, so then I won't be matir it now. Okay? That's only true in min b'mino. In min b'she'eno mino, the isser is not there anymore. It is heter gamur. In other words, what Rashi says is that when he says that al yidei bittul, it's not heter gamur, it's still considered aser, lo tochlenu be'isser, tochlenu beheter, that's only true in min b'mino. In bittul of min b'she'eno mino, it is heter gamur. So it's mutter right away.
Do you think
Okay.
that's shot in Rashi or it's just his read of Rashi?
That would be Rashi Shita according to this. Rashi doesn't say.
Can
Okay.
you just do it in the words now? What I'm confused with the ein heter, the heter side of the thing that was Isser.
The ein. Okay, one second. V'chol shebitarev shelo b'mino. Ein haheter. In other words, the status of heter.
In
Right.
the thing that,
We now say it's mutter, right? What became mutter? It's not that the isser became mutter. The ta'arovet is redefined as not having the isser there. Ein haheter nikra al davar ha'asur. That's not what happens. It's not that you have something which is usser, which we say now you can eat, right? Ella al shem hadavar shinit arev bo. The entire ta'arovet is mutter.
the first heter is also referring to the ta'arovet.
Ein haheter nikra al davar ha'asur. There's no, I'm talking brisker terminology now, there's no chaloshem heter on the isser. It's not that there's something usser here which I say you can eat. That would be in common terminology. But rather, I redefine the ta'arovet. Every ta'arovet you can only have one identity. You cannot have a psychotic or schizophrenic ta'arovet. Okay? The ta'arovet cannot be two things. You have to decide. You have criteria for defining what this mixture is. So your criteria is, say, rov, if it's yavish, or shishim, if it's lach. It doesn't matter now, right? But I determine the identity of this ta'arovet. This ta'arovet is mutter. That means the isser is not there anymore. As opposed to saying the isser is there, but you can eat it now. That would be nikra heter al ha'isser. That is what happens in min b'mino. In min b'mino, nikra heter al ha'isser. Okay?
What's havik misha en lo materin then?
So therefore, if it's min b'she'eno mino, it's like a davar she'eno matirin, because it's not there anymore.
But the it is now.
There's no, in other words, this isser is never going to become mutter, because you nuked it. It expired. The isser met its maker before the heter would have been chal.
Then you should have said there's no more Isser. You shouldn't have said Hala Kamisha and Matirin. It's not.
That's what I'm confused with.
Vahabi kamisha ein lo matirin.
It's not
Okay. I think that's what it means. You're right, he might have put it slightly differently. But I read to you beferish what the
Can you say where that
what the
other thing-
pre-Chodesh
where
said.
that pre-Chodesh you read from is, please?
tzadichet.
Yeah. And then
You want the sif katan?
Yeah.
Give me the sif katan 1 second. Tzadichet. It was on the dinner here. Tzadichet. You need a sif katan. Okay. Roin. Yeah, it's on Sof Sif Bet. It's on the din of the
That
Rashba
starts
of
at
Roin.
Rashba, that one?
Yeah. Roin she'eno mino kamisha eno. Right? Okay?
Okay.
He goes into it. Okay. All right. So that's, I think you have to say that according to Rashi. Okay, so it's very, very important because Davar Shishim Matirin is such an important sugya because it gets to the bottom of how bittul works. Okay? And so you have to ask a very fundamental question. When you have bittul, is the issa still there or not? That's like forget about everything. Just go back for a second. And every balabas is going to ask this question. Good, the nevela fell into my chulent, and you tell me I can eat it, but I want to know, is the issa still there? You don't have to learn Yoreh De'ah to ask that question, right? You have to learn Yoreh De'ah to be able to answer that question, right? But you don't have to learn Yoreh De'ah to ask that question. It's a very intuitive question. I don't know how comfortable anybody would be by eating something. I say that nevela fell in here, but it's batel, don't worry. I mean, I don't know how I would feel about that, honestly, right? So if you the ish halacha without any, like to the extreme, without any, whatever, affect, so then you say, okay, the Torah says it's mutter. But no, but maybe there's some isser here. So how do you relate to it? So again, from Rashi, when you begin to zoom in, Rashi doesn't like bittul. Right? Bittul is still considered isser. It's isser that it sounds like a nonsensical statement. It's isser that's mutter to eat. Whereas the chefza is still usser, but it's mutter to eat it under these circumstances. Now, if you zero in more, according to Rashi, certainly according to Torah Chatat, if you want to stick with the Svar of Rashi, is that whether you consider bittul b'tarovet, whether you consider it still usser, or heter gamur depends on what type of tarovet you're talking about. In min b'mino, the isser is still there, so that makes it b'di'evet. And that's why davar she'esh l'matirin, ad she'tochlenu b'isser, wait and eat it b'heter gamur l'chatchila, so wait till tomorrow. Okay? Whereas min b'she'eno mino, it's heter gamur already. Okay? Say it? All right. Let's take a break for about 10 minutes, and then we'll look at some different definitions of davar she'esh l'matirin. Because the standard case of davar she'esh l'matirin is going to become mutter all by itself. What if you have to do something to make it mutter? Right? There are different levels. Okay? Or you're not sure if it's going to become mutter or not. Okay? All right. So take a 10-minute break. Action. Okay. All right. The standard case, okay, listen. The standard case of davar she'esh l'matirin, right, is it's usher now, it will be mutter later, it happens all by itself. Okay? Now, let's see deviations from that situation, whether we consider it davar she'esh l'matirin or not. Okay? And intuitively, already, if I give you a certain case, and I say, is this also davar she'esh l'matirin, even though it deviates from the standard case, it should depend, and we'll see, it does depend on whether I think like Rashi or I think like the Ran, because that's how davar she'esh l'matirin works. Okay, and it should play itself out. Okay, let's see. Okay, the Gemara here in Avodah, the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, on Daf Ayin Gimel Mud Bet. See, it's on which page? It's the third page of the third page of the sources.
Page 4.
Page 4? Page 4. Okay.
It's good to leave. Here, at the bottom of the third, if that's what you mean.
All right. So the Gemara says that tevel is asur b'mashihu. Okay. If you have some tevel that falls into a ta'rovet, it's not butter. Okay. It says zakla la tuye tevel. Okay, so tevel is asur b'mashu. And the Gemara says, why is tevel asur b'mashu? So the Gemara says, ela tevel my tama, the last line of the Gemara, ela tevel my tama, kehetero kach isuro. Damar Shmuel chita achat poteret et akri. Tevel, you could be matir tevel b'kol shehu. The shiurim of how much you're supposed to, how much truma you're supposed to be mafresh from tevel, are midrabanan, right? Chelek mi-arba'im, chelek mi-chamishim, chelek mi-shishim, right? The different midot. But that's midrabanan. Midoraita chita achat poteret takri. So you could be matir tevel b'kol shehu. So since you can be matir b'kol shehu, it asks b'kol shehu. Okay, there's some sort of chashivut to kol shehu in the din of tevel. Okay. So Tosot asks the following question, right? Why do you need this reason of ke'atero kachisuro? It's a davar she'esh l'matirin. Tevel is usher now. You'll be mafresh and it'll be mutter, right? You have tevel. Hello, you have a problem with that?
Yeah, isn't it just a matter of time, not a matter of doing something?
No, you have to do something. Tevel.
No, for
Well, hold on 1 second. But I just pointed that out from the case of the Beitza or Chadash, where that's just a matter of time. But it doesn't say that Naseres Adibros, right? So we're just dealing with a new case, and Tosot says, right? Ma'ater b'mashu k'shmuel, damar Shmuel chitachat poter takri. V'chihechi dechol shu chashuv latiro, chashuv nami lo'osro. Okay, that's it. V'tema. Dahacha mashma detama detevel b'mashu dekehetero kachisuro. Ubiyushalmi ka'amar detama mishum detevel yesh lo matirin. V'chol davar sheyesh lo matirin afilu be'elef lo batil. Kegon tevel u'shvi'it u'maaser v'hekdesh keshehein b'minan. All right, if it's min b'mino, okay? Aval shelo b'minan b'nosei v'hashta trei ta'ami lamali. Why do we need two reasons? Why does the Gemara here say, in the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, on Daf Ayin Gimel Bet, why does the Gemara say that tevel is asur b'mashahu, because ke'atero kachisuro, It's asur b'mashahu because it's davar she'esh lo matirin. Okay? V'yesh lomar. Okay, this is what Tosfot says. The tzrichi travayu. You need both reasons to say that tevel is to explain that tevel should be asur b'mashahu. De'i leka elachad tama. Because if you only had one reason, the yesh lo matirin, havamina dafka dehecha baalim ba'ir. The az yesh lo matirin, she'abalim yicholim lahafrish. So if suppose you didn't have this reason of ketero kachisuro, right? So you must say that it shouldn't be batel because it's davar sheyesh lo matirin. But it's not. But tevel isn't always a davar sheyesh lo matirin. It's only davar sheyesh lo matirin if the owner of the tevel, because I can't be mafresh somebody else's payroll. You learn one of the. Remember the way you learn shlichut from atem gam atem. One of the limudim of shlichut is from truma. You need shlichut by truma. So either adi shaliach or the baalim or the owner themselves. So the owner's not around. So this is tevel, but it's ein lo matirin because the owner is gone. Okay. So then it should be batel barov, or whatever, or b'shishim, whichever, right? It should be batel. So it's not batel for a different reason. It's not batel because of ketero kachisuro. Okay? So he says the balim, the az yesh lo matir shabalim yocholim lafrish, aval I leka beir, af agav di yochol lelech l'makom shabalim sham. Mikom makom kevan sheyesh lo torach v'hotza'ah, Havi kishe'ein lo matirin. Okay? So Tosfot holds that if it's a davar sheyesh lo matirin, technically it is possible to be matir this tevel, to be matir this iser. But it's not going to happen by itself. It happens only through torach. What's torach? Here you really have to decide. Going next door to get the balim, that's okay. But getting on the train and going 10 hours is not okay. 5 hours, also. 3 hours, I don't know. You're going to Zeno's paradox. At what point you're going to say that it's Torah or it's not Torah? So that's a little fuzzy. But the principle is that if it takes Torah, then it's not considered davar sheyesh lo matirin, and therefore it's mutter. Therefore it'll be batel.
If you know they're coming back in 3 days, though, why isn't it the same as just waiting?
Because it's not Torah. It's just waiting. I understand, but you have to stick with the principle. The principle that he's saying is that if it's ayidei Torah, however you define Torah, okay, if it's ayidei Torah, v'hotza'ah, you have to pay to get there, right? It's going to cost you. Havi kishe'ein lo matirin, okay?
For the baal of the stuff, it's not Torah.
What?
For the person who owns it, he himself can be.
But he's gone. But it fell in here into my tarovet.
For him, is it a davar sheyesh lo matirin? Because he could just do it himself.
Yeah, for him, you're right. That's what he's saying. If the balim is there, so it's a davar sheyesh lo matirin. If the balim is not there, and it's a pain in the neck to get him, so it's a davar she'ein lo matirin. Okay? Hilkach itzrich tamad dahacha mishum de'teira kachisuro. Okay?
Meaning it should be batel, but now it's not batel because...
No, it should not be batel. It's davar sheyesh lo matirin.
No, but then because he's not here and I can't, it's a tarach, it should be batel.
And right.
But then I give another reason to tell you why it's not batel.
Correct. He's saying, what do I need this other reason of ketero kachisuro? Davar sheyesh lo matirin is not batel. So he says it's not always davar sheyesh lo matirin. Sometimes in tevel it's a davar she'ein lo matirin if the baalim are not around. Okay, that's Tosfot. Okay, the Ramban has a bunch of different terutzim. Okay. Which the truth is, I don't want, it'll mess us up too much to get into the Ramban. But the Ramban does not accept this teretz and Tosfot. Okay? You have to have another reason why you need ketero kachisuro. So now let's look at this. Think for a second. If I hold like Tosfot, okay, that if the heter is ba al yidei Torah and hotza'ah, it's not considered davar sheyesh lo matirin, and it is batel. Okay, does that make more sense according to Rashi, or does it make more sense according to the Ran? Or does it not make a difference? What do you think?
Say the question one more time, please.
Okay. Tosfot says, right, the bottom line of Tosfot is that if the heter of the Isser ba rak al yidei torach v'hotza'ah, it's not considered a davar sheyesh lo matirin, and it is batel now. That's what Tosfot says. Yes? Okay. Is that like Rashi or the Ran?
No, it's like Rashi.
I think it's like Rashi. Because according to the Ran would be interested in the halachic status of this object, of this Isser. Not in the practicality of how you're going to be matirit. There are some Isurim which are Asa forever, and there are some Isurim which have a heter Isuro, right? How hard it is to bring that heter on is coincidental. It does fit with Rashi, because Rashi says, why eat it be'isser, wait and eat it beheter? But in other words, it's no big deal. I can embellish Rashi a little bit and say it's no big deal, just wait, and it'll become mutter by itself. So therefore, I don't want you, because let's put it this way, all of bittul, according to Rashi, is b'di'eved. L'chatchila, you shouldn't be somech on it. So it's better to wait. So then you can have situations which are already b'di'eved. If you have to be toreach to be matir, that makes the situation b'di'eved enough to say, you know what? It's not actually I have to just wait. You can say just wait and just go get the guy and just pay for the bus fare and just, all that.
I don't get why you just don't wait till they come back.
What?
Why?
Maybe you'll never come back. It doesn't matter. In other words, you have this tarovet, right? The nature of the Isser is not what's being discussed here, right? That's the Ravid discusses the nature of the Isser. Okay, that's the Ran quote.
Can I just think about it from the Chadash?
Yeah.
What if it's June and it's Chadash and it's not going to be good anymore?
Oh, so that's another question. We'll see that. What happens if before the heter will be chal? That's the next case. If before the heter will be chal, you can take a look. I gave that to you. In that case is mentioned in Shulchan Aruch.
This is also a
Hold on 1 second. The case is Yesh Misha Omer. If you look in Kuf Bet Seif Dalet, Yesh Misha Omer Delo Shayach Davar Sheyesh L'Matirin Heicha Shama Achal Mitkalkel. In other words, if it's going to take so long for the heter to come, then in the meantime it's going to spoil. That's also not a davar sheyesh l'matirin. It's the same principle. Exactly. Because in terms of the nature of the Isser, it doesn't matter in principle whether it's to be mutter tomorrow, or it's to be mutter next Pesach, and now it's the summertime, and in the meantime it's going to be mitkalkel. In terms of the nature of the Isser, this is the type of Isser sheyesh lo matirim. That should be sufficient for the Ran. Okay? But in terms of Rashi, whereas Rashi is a practical consideration, why do you have to eat it now? Just wait. I'll let you eat it. I'll let you eat it later. But if it's not gonna make it, so then the alternative is throwing it out, not eating it later, right? So it's the same principle. Yes. Okay. So Tosfot goes along lines of Rashi, I think, as this case of Imam Ma'achal Mitkalkel. Okay. That's the second. That was the next example I think I wanted to bring here. Okay? All right, another case. Okay? This is in the Rashba. This is a cute question. Okay? So Rashi talks about Dav Sheyesh Matirin here, and he wants to know if you have a case of treifa. Okay? Or it's a suffix treifa. I'm sorry. Suffix treifa. But you can find out whether it's a treifa or not. Okay? You have a beitza shenolda from a suffix treifa. Now the halacha is, right? How do you know something's a treifa? Something that lives yud beit chodesh is not a treifa. Okay? Or we say that the chicken is not going to lay any more eggs if it's a treifa. Okay? So why don't we just wait and see? If the chicken lives, right? So then we know that this beitza is not a treifa. So you have a beitza, which is a suffix treifa, comes from a chicken, which is a suffix treifa, which makes the beitza suffix treifa, and it falls into a ta'arovet. So normally you'd say it's suffix treifa, it's batel. If it's treifa or suffix treifa, it's batel. Right. Oh, but maybe it's a davar sheish lo matirin, because wait, let's isolate put the chicken in isolation. Right? Quarantine the chicken, right? And let's see if the chicken survives. If the chicken survives, so then we know that it's not a treifa. So then we know we can eat it. And if the chicken dies, we'll know, right? So eat it the heter gamur, right? Just wait till you find out, right? That was the question that the Rashba asks. Let's see. The nolad, yesh lanu lachkor v'ladat. It's the fifth line of the Rashba. Yesh lanu lachkor v'ladat. Beitza shel safek treifa. Shenit'arva ba'acherot. V'adayin hatarnegolet kayemet. Okay? Mahu. Lefi she'amru perek elu treifot, shichla kama, mashhinan lehu, v'hadrat. Right? There's a way of knowing, right? V'hatanach rina sharian. If it lays another egg, right, then you know that it's not a treifa. Lefichach tzrichin anu ladat im nidonota kedavar sheyesh lo matirin lav. V'chein hadin legvina shegibnu ota mechalav safek treifa shenit'arva ba'acherot v'adayin habahema kayemet v'ulai teleid. So the halacha that we say that a treifa ain't no yoledet. So if this behema gives birth, so we know that it's not a treifa. Oh, tisha yud beit chodesh, or live for 12 months. V'chein kol kayotze b'zeh. Okay? So that's his question. Because why eat it al yidei bittul when you don't know whether it's a treifa? Wait! Either you'll find out that it's a treifa, and then, okay, you'll have bittul, or you'll find out that it's not a treifa and you'll eat it, you'll know to eat it. Okay? Umistabra. This is clear that this is not davar sheish lo matirin, right? The truth is nobody says that this is davar sheish lo matirin. The question is why isn't it a davar sheish lo matirin? So he says, "Umistabra shelo amru davar sheish lo matirin, ela b'davar shamatir atid lavo bevadai. O shu biyado lahatiro al kol panim." That he's covering tevel, right? Tevel, the heter isn't going to become vadai because maybe you won't be matir it. Maybe you'll never be mafresh. But you can be mafresh. Okay? Right? Al ketzad. Beitza shenoda b'yom tov. Keyotzei behen. Hamatir vadai. She'elamotzo yom tov muter al kol panim. Ulefichach dinu shelo yivatel et ha'isur. Ho'il v'le'erev ye'achol muter. It sounds like Rashi. V'chein adin l'chadash. The itzumo shel yom matir. The yom shishasar memele ba. Okay? V'chein talui b'maaseh, talui b'yado, he talks about tevel, etc. Okay? But here, the heter is lo b'vadai yavo, because you don't know. Maybe it is treif. Okay? So Rashba says you only say davar sheish lo matirin im ha-heter vadai yavo. If you're not sure of the heter yavo, you don't say davar sheish lo matirin. Okay? Now,
so we say also the tevel won't be counted?
No, the tevel therefore is the davar sheish lo matirin because it's biyado. B'chol zot, it's in your power to be matir. Okay? The Or Zarua has a similar question, a broader question, which makes it funny, but he asks about every issur which is teku. Maybe it should be davar sheish lo matirin because teku is achi avoliyo, right? Tishbi yitaretz kushiot ve'ibayot, right? So it's a davar sheish lo matirin because the Eliyahu Navi will come and tell us whether it's mutar asur. It's basically a variation of the Rashba, but it works even if the animal is dead already and you don't have any other simanim. You just wait for Eliyahu Navi, he'll be matir, right? You see that they really, you wonder like what these believing about Mashiach, what it has to do with halacha l'maisa, right? Okay, here's hilchos l'mashiach. Chaticha nesra ayidei teiku kechol hani de'elu treifot, right? Im nitarva b'chatichot acherot, im hi b'teila im lav, mishum shema yavo Eliyahu v'yitaharena. It's not shema yavo Eliyahu. It's vaday coming. Shema yavo v'yitaharena. Let's get the. Okay, let's make sure we're in our emunot v'deot that we're okay. Okay, it's not shema yavo Eliyahu. It's shema yavo Eliyahu v'yitaharena. O shema nimtza batam lahatir. Right, or maybe forget about Eliyahu. We'll figure out a heter. Right now we think it's usher. Right. But somebody will come along and say that it's mutter, right?
But that's not a diversification of material.
But that's what he's asking. V'havalei davar sheyesh lo matirin. O shema ein shayach lomar davar sheyesh lo matirin ela hech shevadai atid liot mutar. Aval hacha shemit barel leisur. Uktzat damim midarim desafek yimtza charata v'yatir lo chacham v'safek lo yimtza v'kari lei sheyesh lo matirin. Right? The Gemara says that Nidarim is davar sheyesh lo matir. All right, okay. So that's the question that someone asked the Or Zarua. Okay, so this is what he answered. My diktiv mara chaticha shenesra al teiku b'chol hanideli treifot in v'taror chatichot achirot imi b'teila im lav mishum shem yavo Eliyahu zal v'yitarena etc. Ein lechacham kamocha l'sh'ol sheila kazot. Come on, okay. The afilu, now listen to this answer, and I think the answer here of the Or Zarua is different than the Rashba. Okay? The Rashba just said that it's not a davar sheyesh lo matirin unless it's vada yavo or it's in your hands vada yavo. Okay? He says something else. Because I could have said the same thing here, right? It's not in your hands to be matir this suffix, because it depends on when Eliyahu Hanavi is going to come and what he's going to decide, etc. So it's not vada yavo. He doesn't say it's not vada yavo. He says, "Ein lechem koch l'shol sheila kazot. Afilu titzolomar sheyikarei ba'avur zeh sheyesh lo matirin." Right? Say for that reason it's a davar sheyesh lo matirin. He says, Kol shekain sheyehei batel. This is great. Because he does a mamon of shach. She'im yatireu Eliyahu nimtza shelo haya asur. Goes back to Indian philosophy, right? Where did the Isser go? I had a suffix, right? And then I say, no, I'm matir the suffix for you. It's not asur. It's mutter. The behemoth was never a treifa, right? So where did the Isser go? It just evaporated. So I was just in this state of ignorance, right? So the Isser just evaporated. So he said, what are you talking about? It's not a davar sheyesh lo matirin. There's no, it means the Isser, it's like Yosef, it's like Yosef, right? When Yosef said, Ani Yosef, where did the Ish Mitzri go? It was always Yosef, right? So it was always mutter. So when Eliyahu Hanavi comes and says, this is mutter, he didn't take the Isser and make it mutter. Told you that you were living in ignorance, and it was always mutter, right? So of course it's mutter to eat. If that's what you're thinking about, you tell me it's a davar sheyesh lo matirin, it shouldn't be batel, because maybe Eliyahu will come along and say it's mutter. If he comes along and says it's mutter now. It's just you don't know. That's not a davar sheyesh lo matirin. You see? It's brilliant. It's like so clear, right? Nimtza shelo haya asur, v'lama nachmir al zeh shelo yehei batel, afilu be'elef yoter me'ishu asur b'veirur. Right? Lo ichmiru chachamim b'davar sheyesh matirin, lo b'davar sha'ayom asur b'veirur, not mitzad safek, u'lemacher yeh mutar, kamo kegon beitz, etc. Right? But this saman of shach. If Eliyahu Hanavi comes along and says it's aser, so it's a davar aser, it should be batel. And he comes along and he says it's mutar, so it was never aser, so you can eat it now also. He says, were you crazy? Just think about what you were asking. Doesn't make any sense. Okay? Now, this is so clear that this is clearly true. But the same would go for the case of the suffix treifa. You don't know what the story is with this, whether this beitza or the chalav is chalav treifa or not. If the behemoth lives, then it was never a treifa. And if the behemoth dies, it was a treifa. Manavshach, it's treifa, so it's batel because it's a davar aser. And if it was never aser, you don't need bittul. It's mutter without bittul, right? But they're two different answers. See that? The Rashba says the heter has to come bevadai. It has to be either memela, so that's certainly bevadai, or it's b'shlitatcha, right? That's how the heter has to come. Whereas the Orzarua is saying
It has to be an Isser, but
it has to, but it's not that it has to be Isser Vadai. What is the nature of the problem that you're talking about? You have something which is Usser now, for sure. And that Isser will become Mutter somehow at a later time. That's not what the Rashba says. The Rashba says he modifies how the Isser needs to be nitar. The Isser needs to be nitar o memele, o biyadcha, aval vaday yavo o b'shlitatcha. If it's not b'shlitatcha, like Novi, it's not b'shlitatcha. He doesn't, right? Mashiach lo mitkasher, right? You can't tell him when to come. Lo b'shlitatcha. So that's not davar sheyesh lo matirin. The Rashba fits in with Rashi. It has to do with when is it legitimate to say Acha tuchlenu be'isa tuchlenu beheter. When is it legitimate to say just wait? So I can say just wait if waiting is going to do something, right? But if waiting, maybe it'll help, maybe it won't help, right? Or it's not biyadi. If it's biyadcha, so then I say, why do you want to eat al day bittul? Be matirit. Be mafresh. Why do you want to eat it al day bittul? Just be mafresh. Or just wait. That's the Rashba. The Rashba is like Rashi. What the Orzarua is saying is you have to look at the nature of the Isser. Is this an Isser which will become mutter? So in the case of the Teiku of Achi of Eliyahu, no, there's no Isser here which becomes mutter. It's either you find out that it was never Asser, or that it is Asser. But in Treifa is either Asser or it's not Treifa. Right? So that fits much better with the Ran, where the reason davar sheyesh material is not batel has to do with the nature of the isser. It's not usser enough. So here it's either mutter or it's usser enough. Okay, so that's a.
Isn't the machloket on how you would define davar sheyesh lo matirin? Like, are you referring to a situation like maser, hafrashat masrot, or something which definitely, halachically now is asur and in the future?
That's what he's saying.
That's what he's saying. That's the machlok. Like, it seems to me the machlok.
Right, but what is that machloket based on?
The
That's
weight of the machloket is on how we define davar sheyesh lo matirin. Is it something which can randomly become
right, but how you determine,
or is it something which its halachic status inherently now is, like you said, definitely
right? So, but how can I make that determination? How I answer that question depends on a more fundamental question. Why is davar sheyesh lo matirin not batel? And that goes back to Rashi and the Ran. These are test cases for Rashi and the Ran. That's why I'm putting it in that context. See what I'm saying? You're right. You can have a question like, okay, davar sheyesh lo matirin. So what does that mean? I can raise all these questions, which this is the form that raised. It's never really going to become mutter because it's going to expire first, right? It's going to get spoiled first. It's not going to become mutter because it goes into min v'she'eino mino and it gets nuked. It doesn't become mutter, right? It's not going to become mutter because maybe the world is going to end and tomorrow will never come, right? You can have all these things about why it not become mutter. So how do you determine those questions? Right? It's only mutter through tircha. So that depends. If I say, Rashi in general, what comes out of Rashi's approach would be practical considerations, right? Whereas according to the Ran, it should be more theoretical consideration in terms of the nature of the Isser. Is this the type of Isser, sheyesh lo heter, so that I can say it's not Usser enough to create a conflict with real heter? Right? That's to do with the nature of the Isser. It's a theoretical consideration. Whereas according to Rashi, it's practical. I want you to wait. I don't want you to eat it now, because you can eat it in a better way. Okay, so can I eat it in a better way, or can't I eat it in a better way? Well, if it's Safek Yavo, so then maybe I can't, right? If it's not, I'll never get to eat it because it's going to get spoiled first. But according to the Ran, those considerations don't make any sense. It has to do with the nature of the Isser. The fact that something's going to get spoiled or not, the fact that they didn't have refrigeration then and we have refrigeration now, that should change the nature of the conflict in the Tarovet makes no sense at all. Okay? All right, so that's another case.
It is a little weird because, yes, they're both thinking about the nature of the Isser, but the way then they describe the issue is the complete opposite of each other.
What do you mean?
Well, for the Ran, it was, I think about the nature of the Isser, and I say it's not really so with Usser.
Right.
And with the Orzarua, I think about the nature of the Isser, and I said it is actually Usser.
No, but it's a different case, but he's addressing the question in terms of the nature of the Isser.
But it's not a different case. His definition of what is something that is Yesh Lo Matir is something that is...
Yes. And no, it's Usser now and Mutter tomorrow. That's the definition. Right? That approach fits with the Ran. Right? But he's saying, but there's no Isser, but in the case of Achi of Oliyahu, there's no Isser which is Usser now and Mutter tomorrow. It's either Heter Gomer always, or it's Isser. And if it's Isser and it's Tarovet, so it's Batel. So in Manavshach, it's Mutter to eat. It's either Mutter to eat because it's Batel, or it's Mutter to eat because it's Mutter to eat. Okay. Okay. There's a I'll just tell you, there's a machloket. The Rambam holds, for example, by what's the thing with chametz? Chametz b'Pesach. B'chor, that's like the best example of davar sheyesh lo matirin. I'm not talking about the Issur D'Rabbanan of chametz she'arvel of Pesach. But we have chametz on Pesach, so we know chametz b'Pesach is not batel, right? So the Rambam says here, where is it? Here, back to Perek Tetvav, Halacha Yud Bet. Yireli, right? Shafilu davar sheyesh lo matirin im nitarev b'she'eino mino v'lo natan tam mutar. Lo yezeh sheyesh lo matirin chamur mitevel shaharei efshar letakno. V'af al pichein shelo b'mino b'notein tam k'mo shebe'arnu. Okay, so he says there's a chiluk, brings a bride from Tevel, right, between min b'mino and she'eino mino. Okay? V'ai, but chametz on Pesach, we all know, is eino batel, bein b'mino, bein b'she'eino mino. Right? Even though Rabbeinu Tam says that chametz on Pesach should really be batel min b'she'eino mino b'shishim. But I don't have the guts to be matir. Right? His wife was probably saying, don't even think about it, right? But it's pretty interesting because Rabbeinu Tam had a lot of guts on a lot of different things, but he wasn't going to mess with chametz on Pesach. Yeah. Anyway, Rabbeinu Tam had everything different, right? His mezuzahs were lying down, the Sifrei Torah and the Aron were lying down. He had different shita and tzitzis, so he wasn't afraid. But anyway, so the Rambam says, "V'al titma al chametz b'Pesach shaTorah amra kol machmetzes lo tochelu lefichach ichmiru bo k'mo shebe'arnu." He says, don't worry about chametz b'Pesach. Chametz b'Pesach b'mashehu, even though it's a davar sheyesh lo matirin, and it should be b'mashehu only in min b'mino, even in min b'she'eino mino, because ichmiru alav Torah, right? So the Rambam holds that chametz on Pesach is a davar sheyesh lo matirin, but it's more chamor. There's an additional chumrah to aser even min b'she'eino mino. Okay, the Mordechai, I think quoting the Shulchan Aruch here, right, says that chametz on Pesach is not a davar sheyesh lo matirin because it's choser leisuro. So it's aser on Pesach, it's mutter after Pesach, but next Pesach can be aser again. Right? So that's not considered davar sheyesh lo matirin. Okay? That, the Mordechai, only makes sense according to the Ran. Makes no sense according to Rashi. Because you have a whole year to eat it. Okay, so next Pesach will be Asur again. Okay? So Rashi could still say, why you have to eat the bread that fell into your tarovis on Pesach? Wait, it'll be mutter after Pesach. Right? I said, well, already asked the next Pesach. What are you talking about? But there's plenty of time to eat it. Right? So according to Rashi, the Mordechai makes no sense. Okay? The Mordechai is obviously saying that it has to do with the nature of the Isser. Now, you don't have, if you hold like the Ran, you don't have to hold like the Mordechai. Right? You can still say the nature of the Isser is that it becomes mutter. The fact it becomes Usser again, fine, but it becomes mutter, and that's enough to satisfy the Ran. But you can only say the Mordechai if you hold like the Ran. It's talui in one direction. So the Mordechai can only say it's significant, the fact that it's chozeli isuro is only significant if you talk about the nature of the Isser. You're not talking, in order to have the conflict necessary between Isser and Heter, right? It has to become mutter forever. If it's chozeli isuro, that's not a davar sheyesh lo matirin. That's usser enough. Right? That's usser enough. You can argue and say it's not usser enough. There's room to argue about it. But the whole argument would take place within the context of the Ran. Within the context of Rashi, you have a whole year to eat it. That's good enough. Clearly, you could say ach tochlenu be'isser tochlenu beheter. Okay? So the Mordechai is clearly like the Ran, that it has to do with the nature of the Isser, and the nature of the Isser of Chametz is that it's not a davar sheyesh lo matirin, because you could say that it's always Chametz. It's chozeli isur, it's always Chametz. I don't know if you could maybe build this. He doesn't say this, but Chametz is usher the whole year in the Mikdash. So you could say for that reason, it's there are only two things that are mutter that are Chametz in the Mikdash: Shtei Alechem and Chalot Todah. Right, 10 out of the 40. Right. Otherwise, Chametz is usher on the Mizbeach. Okay. So maybe for that, I mean, that's not what he says, but you know. So you could say that also. It's always chametz, and it's always usher someplace, so it's not a davar sheyesh lo matirin. Okay.
It's also still though looking at the nature of this.
Right. It's all within the whole discussion. Is within the context of the Ran. Right. If you hold like Rashi's, then clearly chametz would be a davar sheyesh lo matirin. Okay. There's another example. All right. There's a complicated cases in the Ran, which the Ran actually uses his principle to explain. This will finish, and we'll have to explain the Rif. If you remember, for those of you who were here for Reicha, right, where the Rif had this funny thing about Reicha, that the reason Reicha, when the bread has tam basar in it, the reason you can't eat it with chalav, right? Even though reicha lav milsahi, he said because it's like a davar sheyesh lo matirin. Remember that? That's what the Rif said.
Because you could eat the bread.
Because you can eat the bread without the. You can eat the dagim not with the basar. You can eat the bread by itself, right? So he says it's like a davar sheyesh lo matirin. So therefore, it's not batel. Okay. As we saw from that, we concluded from that according to the Rif, reicha is at least a mashahu. Because if it wasn't even a mashahu, then it's not there. There's nothing to talk about. That goes back to how min b'she'eno works according to the Taras Chatas, right? So he holds. This is just to remind you. He holds that reicha is a mashahu, okay, and it's normally mutter b'di'evet, but in the case of the pat she'afa'a imatzli, it's usher to eat it b'krutach, because it's a davar sheyesh lo matirin, you can eat it by itself. That's what the Rif said in Chulin. Okay? So this bothers the Ran because it's min b'she'eno mino. It's the tam of the tzli in the pot. It's min b'she'eno mino. So davar sheyesh lo matirin, if it's min b'she'eno mino, is batel. That's the question the Ran asks. So some people conclude that the Rif holds, maybe that's what the Rambam wasn't sure about, that Yirah Li, he wasn't sure about min b'she'eno mino. The people conclude the Rif holds that davar sheyesh lo matirin is not batel even in min b'she'eno mino, because that's the case of pat she'afa'ai matzli. Yeah? If you saw the Ran, that's what the Ran said. So the Ran has a very good teirutz. He says that the case of Pacha Afabit Tzli, let's see where he says it.
Bottom of the first page.
Is the bottom of the first page? Yeah, 1 second. So that's how he explains the Mayim and Melech case. But he also explains the Rif with this. He says as follows, 1 second.
The sleep part was right.
Yeah, Aval Hi, it's towards the end, all right? Aval Ba'ahi Depach Afa'im Atzli B'tanur. Okay? See that? Delaka lechmure le b'mino. Second. Delo shayach klal ilo machmerinan le b'she'eno mino. Second. Tell me for 1 second. No, he says it beforehand. This is just his conclusion. Yeah. He says, the Kevan, I'm back up. Kevan dahavi davar sheyesh lo matirin. She'af achshav yesh lo sha'at heter. He says the case of the pat she'afa abit tzli, the davar sheyesh lo matirin is right now it's mutter. Because you can eat the pot, not with milchiks, right? So that's different than the standard case of davar sheyesh lo matirin, where it's asa now and only be mutter later. The case of the pot, it's why is the rif called davar sheyesh lo matirin? Because it's mutter now under different circumstances. Okay? Sha'af achshav yesh lo sha'at heter afilu b'she'eno mino lo batil upat she'afa'ay matzli b'tanur lahadamya she'af achshav yesh la heter la'ochla shelo b'kutach hilkach b'dinhu da'afilu b'she'eno mino lo batil. Why is that? Because what's the reason of davar sheyesh lo matirin? Why is it not batel? Right? Or why is it, 1 second, why is it batel in min b'she'eno mino? Why is it batel in min b'she'eno mino? Because there's enough conflict. Right? There's a little conflict between issa v'heter, because it's usher now, but that's not enough. This is where the hotels part, right? It's not enough conflict. So how we mashlim the conflict? By adding min b'she'eno mino. But this, the case of Pacha Afa B'Tanur, is a super davar sheyesh lo matirin. In the sense that it's not usher now and mutter later, that there's a little bit of conflict, that I can be mashlim with the conflict of the min b'she'eno mino. This is heter gomor now. Just don't eat it with the kutach, with the milk. So something which is heter gomor now, even when you add min b'she'eno mino, there's still not enough conflict. Okay? So in this case, you have a regular case of davar sheyesh lo matirin, and you can have what I would call a super davar sheyesh lo matirin, that it's mutter now, just under different circumstances. That, even in min b'she'eno mino, the Ran says, is not batel. Okay? And that's how he explains the Rif. It's very elegant to explain the Rif. Okay? So then you get into that case. Okay?
Then why is anything never batal? Meaning,
What? What do you mean?
Maybe I'm not understanding clearly. Like, why should the basar that falls in the chal be batal? Because the basar is mutter on its own.
No, it's... What do you mean? But it's not mutter now. It's in the thing. In the case...
Yeah, but when it's mixed in, it's not mutter.
No.
I'm not getting it.
In the case of the kutach, even with the tarovet, is mutter now. The kutach has... I'm sorry. The pot has tarovet of tam basar in it.
Correct.
With the tam basar, it's mutter.
Without milk.
Just eat it without the milk.
Correct.
Now.
It's just
But
flesh
that-
of bread.
But when the meat
then
falls
when it
into the...
falls- when the bread falls into the kutach, he's going to say it's asa, right?
It's usher.
I'm not. Say it to me again.
No,
I'm
he's not.
explaining.
He's saying it's usher to eat this bread with kutach.
Yeah.
And because it's a davar sheish l'matirin. Because you can eat the bread without the kutach.
Meaning, and when it would fall into the
that's a different story.
Never be batal.
No, then they get into not bar not. You know,
Oh,
you have to
would be
decide.
batal.
Maybe you have to decide in your not bar not issues whether the time came through reach, it didn't come through a kli. That's a separate
Meaning, I
parsha.
wouldn't apply
He's not
the rule
talking
of
about
Rashi.
asering the pot when it's in the kutach b'di'evet. He's not talking about that.
He's
He's saying
that the Rashi
asering the
material
pot
is
to
never batal.
eat with the kutach l'chatchila. And he says you can't. He says the tam of the tzli is not batel in the pot because the pot with the tzli in it is a davar sheyesh lo matirin because you can eat it by itself or eat it with something with.
Why couldn't we say that about every not bar not case?
Not barnat is a question of b'di'evet.
Lost it. I've totally lost
Forget
it.
about not barnat. Forget about not barnat. Because not barnat, this is happens al yidei reicha. He says it's a davar sheish lo matirin.
So he would. I'm sorry. If everyone else understands, then I'll be quiet. But he's talking about the not bar not case.
Because in not barnat, it's not even a okay.
In the step before the not
Stop.
bar.
In not barnat, it's not even a mashu. So you don't have to get the davar sheish
That's
lo
the
matirin.
only difference.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we'll stop here. This is what we've got. Okay. How davar sheish matirin works is one of two possibilities. Either Rashi, Asher Tochlona Be'isr Tochlona Beheter, and it becomes something which is very technical and practical. Those are the types of considerations you make when you decide whether something is davar sheish matirin or not. Or it has to do with the halachic status, and that's the Ran, which talks about the necessity for conflict between Isser and Beheter. Right? Now, the main issue of this discussion is around davar sheish matirin and nin b'she'eino mino. So either Rashi is in the Chalik, right, and he thinks that davar sheish matirin is even in nin b'she'eino mino, and maybe the Rif also holds davar sheish matirin is even in nin b'she'eino mino. Just reject the Ran, right? And then the Svara is it applies every place. Okay, that's one approach. The other approach is to say no. It depends on the halachic status, right? And then you can have all these deviations, and according to this question, we'll judge how davar sheish lo matirin works, right? And they're practical considerations. If it's going to be chozel yisuro, if the isser is definitely going to come, if the isser is only through tircha, all these things. If they're practical considerations, you're in Rashi's camp, and if they're the status of the isser considerations, then you're in the Ran's camp. Okay? The other very important point that comes out of this is the distinction, according to the Shita of Rashi, between how bittul works in min b'mino or min b'she'eino mino. That in min b'mino, it's nikra heter al ha'isur. So it's something which is asur here, which I'm saying is mutter to eat, right? So therefore it's legitimate to say, ad she'tochlenu be'isur, tochlenu beheter gamur. So it's not heter gamur in a tarovet, right? But that is only min b'mino. In min b'she'eino mino, the reason I don't have that problem, if Rashi agrees with the distinction, the reason I don't have that problem is min b'she'eino mino, there's no isser remains halachically. So there's no davar sheish lo matirin here. It's batel because it basically obliterated the isser. So there's nothing to talk about. In order to say something's not batel, it has to be there, and then you say it's not batel. But if you nuke it, so then you don't say it's not batel, you just say it's not there. Okay? Beseder.